Hey guys, so this has been quite a heavily requested video from people looking at moving to PS4 or playing the game on PS4. They want to know where the classes sit in terms of what's the best, what's the worst, what should they look to play on release. Now I have just done a Q&A session with Blackout Gaming, so hit that exclamation mark in the top right corner. That will take you over to a video that's going to show you all of the content that we just went over, where I answered some of the questions that a lot of people have been asking. Now I did want to address the classes myself, so I want to go on record as saying this is entirely speculation. Don't jump down my throat on account of the fact that I don't know what classes are 100% coming into the game. When I know, I will tell you by all means. However, what we're running off here is the assumption that the 6 classes that we started with on Xbox will also be the 6 classes that we start with on PS4. It just makes sense. So we'll start off with PvE. For a lot of people, PvE grinding is how they're going to spend a lot of their time playing the game. Now, a lot of people won't necessarily stick to one of these 6 classes, so what they'll be looking for is which class is going to be the best for them in terms of grinding early on, which one's going to help them make enough money to stockpile that silver, get their gear enhanced, and get it ready for the class that they do want to play. Now, in terms of PvE grinding and the simplicity of picking up the class and playing that class, you can't go wrong with both the Wizard and the Witch. So the Wizard and the Witch are incredibly self-reliant. They don't need to carry mana pots or health pots. They have their own self-healing and their own mana drain, which makes them incredibly great grinding classes. Couple this with the fact that pretty much everything they do is an AoE, means that grinding packs of mobs is relatively easy. This class is simple to pick up from day one. You're not going to have to invest a lot of time in understanding and learning complex combinations, and it will carry you through to the end game as being one of the best grinding classes there is. Now, Wizard and Witch, even post Awakening, are still fantastic. I do want to point out though that a lot of the things that you've probably read on Wizard and Witch in terms of PC is not necessarily the same on console. Well, that's more in terms of PvP, and we'll address that in a little bit. Now, coming up very close to Wizard and Witch is Berserker. Now, Berserker's a very tanky melee class. It has a lot of grabs in its arsenal, and it has a lot of survivability, so it has a bunch of self-heals. Now, the reason that Berserker comes right up here to the top tier is, unlike the Witch and the Wizard, you don't need mana. You use WP, which you can get back from auto-attacking or potions. But more importantly, it's the fact that it's very self-reliant in healing. You can add skill add-ons later on that are going to allow one of your main grinding skills, which allows you to spin in a circle and cleave things apart, to also heal you. This makes the class incredibly quick and efficient when it comes to grinding. Overall, in terms of the best early game grinding classes, these 3 you can't go wrong with. Berserker is also very durable and resilient in PvP, so handles some grind spot contention quite easily. Now, next up on the list, we're going to put Ranger. Now, the reason that Ranger isn't higher up there and on the S tier in my eyes is because it is more reliant on potions. The class needs potions to be able to grind efficiently early on. Now, this isn't to say that it will always need them, and there are setups that you can run later on that are going to allow you to pretty much bypass the mana-hungry nature of the Ranger. However, what I would say is that you're going to need to invest some time into the class. So the class itself needs gear to become really exceptional in terms of PvE. And once you do have some gear on the class, and once you've got your rotations down and you understand the class and sort of more of its intricacies, then it does become a great grinding class. It's also one of the best classes to have as a boss ult later on. Now, we'll address the PvP side of these classes because it does shift on the list slightly once we address that. But from entirely a PvE perspective, unless you're planning on maining the Ranger for a PvP reason or for the long term, I would say that you're probably best in picking up one of the other 3 classes purely to grind early on. Next up, we have Salk. Now, Salk is more self-reliant when it comes to the mana side of things, although it does need potions quite a bit in terms of healing itself. You can heal through Bloody Calamity, but it's just such a long cooldown that it's not that great early on pre-awakened. It is self-reliant thanks to skill add-ons when it comes to PvE grinding. But again, you've got to get to the point where you have those skill add-ons, and before then you're relying on Shard Explosion and using your AP buff to get mana back. So although this is relatively easy to do, it does drop it down on the tier list from a sustainability side of things early on. It does improve later on. But the reason it doesn't jump up from B tier to A tier for me is because it's just not a great early game grinder. You pretty much just spam Dark Flame once you unlock it. Now, unfortunately, Dark Flame isn't a huge damage dealing skill, and it doesn't have a huge AoE like some of the other classes have. You're not going to be the best grinder or the fastest grinder, and although you're self-reliant, you can sustain your mana indefinitely once you hit those skill add-ons and you're at the higher levels. It's just not as good as some of the other classes. That's not to say that Salk isn't a great class, it just isn't fantastic during the pre-awakened early game grinding phase. And depending on how long it takes for the awakenings to hit will also dictate how sick of grinding you get on Salk. On Xbox, a lot of Salks burn out because the grind is absolutely horrific. Once you hit sort of the Medaya onwards regions, you find that you're just not as efficient as the other classes. And the same can be said for Warrior. Now, unfortunately, Warrior lacks any real clear speed when it comes to the early pre-awaken phase. It's not a great grinding class, it's a very slow and steady class. You're going to need health potions to sustain to some degree. It doesn't bring anything huge to the table. If you're looking for purely a PvE class, I just wouldn't even bother touching Warrior early on. However, the class does improve post-awakening, but we're not sure how long that's going to be. Now, what we're going to do next though, because we've already sorted them in terms of PvE, is we're going to look at PvP. So pre-awakened PvP doesn't really have a huge focus. I mean, we're potentially not going to have nodes and siege wars early, which means that most of the PvP that we're going to focus on is going to be things like grind spot defenses. Now, that's not to say that there won't be group PvP, because there will be groups roaming, there will be guilds that will fight each other, and again, we're not quite sure on how Awakening is going to fit in before nodes and sieges, or whether we're going to have sieges and nodes first like we did on Xbox. So it's a little bit hard to judge. But what we're going to do is we're going to drop all the classes back down to the bottom here, and we're going to have a look at the classes in PvP pre-awakening before we go any further. So this is assuming that the classes have no absolute skills, they don't have their awakening toolkit yet, and we are going to look at them kind of objectively. So we're going to look at things like 1v1, we're going to look at their ability to fight multiple opponents 1vx, and we're going to look at how they fit into groups. Now, ultimately, when it comes to the tier list here, it is going to be entirely subjective. People will feel that things sit differently on tier lists. People will understandably feel that their class is better or weaker than other classes. Drop it in the comment section, guys. Let's hear what everybody thinks. Help the PS4 community with the knowledge that you already know from Xbox. Get involved, guys. I mean, ultimately, consoles at some point in the future would be amazing if they became cross-platform, but that's an argument for another video. So pre-awaken PvP, S tier, Berserker again. Berserker has to go to S tier for a lot of the reasons that it's good in PvE grinding. It's durable, it's got high sustain, it has grabs. Now the grabs are huge when it comes to PvP. Being able to quite literally pick somebody up and disrupt them, move them to your own team in group PvP, or just stop them from hitting you while you deal damage to them. Berserker is a fantastic 1v1 class. It excels in 1v1, 1vx, and group PvP pre-awakening. In fact, you will struggle to find any real weaknesses to a Berserker during the early game. They're an absolutely phenomenal class to play, and they are really hard to deal with. Now, Berserkers are definitely a disruptive class in group PvP. If you're the kind of player that likes to jump into the backlines, stun multiple people, do huge amounts of damage, grab somebody and run away, and just be a real pain, Berserker's a really good class for you. Now, next on the list we have Ranger. Now, Ranger's going to S tier as well, but for different reasons. So the Ranger, obviously being a range class, it's not going to be jumping into the middle of a big group of people. However, what the Ranger has that Berserker doesn't quite have is insane burst damage. Now, you need to learn how to animation cancel and shotgun spam. It's not difficult. Ranger is essentially a one-trick pony pre-awakened. If you land a knockdown on any of the other classes other than potentially Berserker, 9 times out of 10 you will kill them. Shotgun spam is that strong early on that I've seen even Berserkers melted in less than 3 seconds by this class. Ranger is a phenomenal PvP class. It has no issues defending 1v1 against most classes. It has no issues fighting one or two people, although it does start to drop off as more and more people get there, purely because of the fact that they are eventually going to get hit by CC. In terms of group PvP, it can stand in the middle ground behind Berserkers. It can literally just shotgun spam without needing to land its own CC. This means that Ranger can put out an insane amount of damage on their front line or also on their back line if it manages to flank. Overall, I would say Ranger is second only to Berserker, and even then it's a coin flip. I mean, Berserker being more resilient means you can make a lot more mistakes than you can on a Ranger, but Ranger will hands down destroy anything in its path if you land that CC and you follow it with the right animation cancel. It's truly a sight to behold, and I hated fighting this class during pre-awaken phase. It was a nightmare. Next up on the tier list, we're going to put Salk, and we're going to put Salk at A tier. Now, the reason that Salk is A tier is not because of its damage. It doesn't have high self-sustain. In fact, you would struggle to see why Salk was here if you didn't know the class. Now, I've played the class for a long time, so I am quite biased in this sense. However, from pre-awakening on console, I would definitely put the class at A tier. Now, the reason for this is Salk is incredibly mobile. It's a hyper-mobile class, and the best thing about its mobility is that it's tied to its invincibility frame. You teleport around a lot, and when you're teleporting left, right, forwards or backwards, during the animation you're hitting an invincibility frame that means you can't be hit. This means that the class is incredibly hard to tie down. You can invincibility frame Berserker's grabs if you do them at the right time. You can range them so that they just look stupid trying to grab thin air. If you're clever and you know how to time things, you can avoid the knockdown on ranges, which nullifies a lot of their damage. That means that you can easily close gaps. Salk is a very, very good dueling class. You can 1v1 and you can 1vx pretty much any class in the game. You will struggle against Berserkers purely because you have to play a very wear them down game, and it can be difficult to 100 to 0 them early on. Now, the Salk class, it is worth noting, is incredibly hard to master. This class has no set in stone combinations. You are going to have to learn how to animation cancel multiple skills, and you're going to have to know what the other classes can do. And it's because of this that it isn't considered an outright top tier pick pre-awakened. However, that does change post-awakening. Now, next up on the list is Witch and Wizard. Now, these two change quite a bit. So, if it was solo 1v1 PvP pre-awakening, I would say they'd hover between B and A tier. This is different to PC because they don't suffer the same fate as they did on PC in terms of being really easy to shut down. Now, their 1v1 is a lot better on console than it was on PC. And the reason for this is the controller inhibits mobility. So although pre-awakening you can quite easily shut down a wizard and a witch, you still have to find ways to contend with their self-healing early on. The limited damage output means that you're going to struggle to be able to kill these guys very quickly on anything, other than if you land a knockdown on a ranger and you grab them as a Berserker. Unfortunately, Salk doesn't necessarily have the damage to 100 to 0 them, and if they do manage to teleport away after your combo, chances are they're going to heal too much for you to manage to just finish them off. When it comes to group PvP, they are hands down S tier. For group PvP, they are absolute gods. They bring so much to the team. Protect area, reducing the damage taken by 8 people in an area around them, and you don't need to be grouped with them for this to affect your guild. They bring heals to the table that group heal. They are a fantastic class in terms of their AoE disruption. Dropping an AoE slow, dropping Meteor that absolutely demolishes people, Thunderstorm or Lightning, I can never remember the name of the skill, to literally just AoE stun and chain stun people multiple times. They excel in group PvP. They will struggle in 1v2s, they will struggle in 1v3s, 4s and small scale, purely because it gets really easy to lock them down and pick them out. That's why they're going to sit at B tier currently for PvP. This does change on console post-awakening though, because their 1v1 is phenomenal on Xbox at the moment. They are hands down one of the scarier classes to fight. However, I keep them at B tier purely because their pre-awaken toolkit doesn't bring enough damage for them to be a serious threat in terms of small scale, and their group potential is only really going to be beneficial if we get sieges and nodes first. And if we don't get sieges and node wars early, then group PvP is pretty irrelevant. So keep that in mind. However, having an S tier grinding class coupled with, let's say, a B to A tier PvP class, the Wizard and the Witch you cannot go wrong with, and you will always be in high demanding guilds. Now, Warrior in terms of PvP, it's going to have to go below the rest. I would put it on D tier, but I feel that that might be a bit of a disservice. So Warriors 1v1 is not great. Pre-awakening, it's very much a waiting game. You can block a lot of damage incoming, which is great. However, your CC is quite telegraphed, and you really need to land that CC to be able to do any damage. From a Salk point of view, pre-awakening on Xbox, Warriors were easy. I had no issues with Warriors. I didn't lose a fight to a Warrior, and I don't see that many of the classes would. I don't see them having the damage to shut down Wizards and Witches healing, and they definitely can't outdamage Ranger or Berserker. In terms of group PvP, they don't really have a huge place. I mean, they are great for disruption, don't get me wrong. However, they don't have the same kind of tanky sustain that Berserker has. So if you get caught in the middle of a pack of people, chances are you're going to get blown up. Overall, Warrior Pre-Awaken, I feel like I'm quite negative about the class, but I struggle to find positive points. I would love for Warriors in the comment section to help us and help provide some insight into the Warrior class, give it some props that it may deserve that I'm overlooking. But overall, I would say that it has to sit at the bottom of the pile for PvP. So if you're a new player to Black Desert, what class should you look to pick up? What I would say is that if you're a new class and you are looking to pick up something that's going to benefit you in PvE and PvP early on and let you get a feel for the game before you either switch onto a new class that you're waiting to come out or you decide to commit to the class long term, one of these four is probably going to be your best bet. What I would say is that a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy Ranger post-awakening, so have a look into that beforehand, because getting melee weapons instead of bolstering your range skills can be a negative for a lot of people wanting to play a ranged class. For everybody else though, I think that Wizard, Witch or Berserker are going to be a fantastic choice. Leave in the comment section what you feel about this. I know that tier lists go down like a lead balloon, and I am sorry that I chose to do this side of things. I wanted to give in-game footage on all of the classes, however I've filled up every single one of my character slots on both the NA and the EU versions of my account. So unfortunately I won't be able to do that. Now if this does get the views and if people are interested in seeing this kind of content and it's not overly negative, I will look to address the other classes. I will look to address post-awakening as well. Until then though guys, if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. As I've said in my last video, there is the members option now as well. If you're interested in potentially supporting the channel, having access to members only streams and members only videos, then definitely hit that. Also, when it comes to the guild on PS4, eXile has opened recruits. Check my community tab and you'll be able to put in an application there. We're currently working through those and there's a lot more information on the guild. As always though guys, thanks very much for your support. I cannot express how much I appreciate the fantastic support the community has given me. I will continue to produce console-based content both for PS4 and Xbox moving forwards, and I hope to see a lot more of you in the comment section soon. Thanks for watching guys.